A farmer led a peaceful life on his large rural property. One day he came across black apples scattered near the orchard. Curious, he decided to keep them and observe what would happen over time. When the apples began to open, something left everyone in shock. Before learning about this surprising story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The rising sun cast its first rays over Jack Thompson's vast orchard, tinting the leaves with golden hues as he carried out his morning inspection. The 45-year-old farmer walked among the trees with the familiarity of someone who knew every trunk, every branch, every leaf of this place he had inherited from his father. His steps were firm on the dew-moistened earth, and his calloused hands occasionally touched the trunks of the apple trees as if greeting them. It was then that something unusual caught his attention. On the ground near one of the oldest trees in the orchard, there was an apple different from all he had seen in his years of cultivation. The fruit was completely black, as if it had been dipped in dark ink. Jack bent down, picking up the apple with caution. The texture was smooth, and despite the abnormal coloration, there were no signs of decay. "How strange," he muttered to himself, turning the fruit between his fingers. As he raised his eyes, he realized it wasn't just an isolated apple. There were several others scattered on the ground, all with the same mysterious coloration. Some still hung from the branches, contrasting dramatically with the green leaves. Sarah, his wife, approached with a basket of freshly collected eggs. "Jack, breakfast is—" "What's that?" She interrupted her speech upon noticing her husband's concentrated expression and the strange fruit in his hands. "I'm not sure," he replied, handing the apple to her to examine. "I found several of them like this today. I've never seen anything like it in all these years." Sarah furrowed her brow, studying the fruit with the same curiosity as her husband. "Could it be some disease, some new pest?" "It doesn't seem like it," Jack answered, picking up more black apples from the ground. "Look, the texture is perfect. There are no insect marks, no signs of deterioration. It's as if they were born this way." The couple decided to collect all the black apples they found, filling 2 large baskets. Jack set aside some for analysis and stored the rest in a cool room in the barn. Their daughter, Emily, a 20-year-old agronomy student, would be fascinated by this discovery when she returned from college over the weekend. In the days that followed, Jack closely observed his orchard. More black apples continued to appear, always on the same trees. He began to make detailed notes about the phenomenon, recording dates, quantity of fruits, and any changes he noticed. It was on the afternoon of the 5th day that the first black apple began to open. Jack was organizing his tools when he heard Sarah calling him urgently from the barn. When he arrived there, he found his wife staring fixedly at one of the baskets. The apple had split in half like a flower blossoming, and inside was something that made them both hold their breath, seeds that emitted a soft, almost hypnotic golden glow. It wasn't a reflection of light. The seeds really shone with their own light. "My God," whispered Sarah, her voice trembling slightly. "What's happening here, Jack?" He had no answer. In all his years working the land, he had never witnessed anything like this. The golden seeds seemed to pulse with their own energy, like tiny glowing hearts. In the following days, more apples began to open, revealing the same extraordinary phenomenon. Jack started planting some of the seeds in separate pots, keeping them under constant observation. His scientific curiosity fought with a growing feeling that he was dealing with something that went beyond normal understanding. The phenomenon began to affect his routine. Jack spent more and more time in the barn, observing the apples and making notes. Sarah often found him sitting in silence, contemplating the glowing seeds with a distant look. "We need to keep this secret for now," he said one night during dinner. "At least until we understand better what's happening." Sarah agreed, but they both knew it would be difficult to hide something so extraordinary for long. There were already comments in town about the strange lights that were sometimes seen coming from the direction of the farm at night. The news of the first seed that germinated came through Emily, who had taken on the task of monitoring the pots during her weekend visits. The sprout that emerged from the earth wasn't green, but had a metallic silver tone that sparkled under the sunlight. "Dad," said Emily, adjusting her glasses as she examined the sprout with fascination, "this is absolutely impossible. Plants don't grow like this. They can't grow like this." Jack just nodded, observing the delicate silver sprout that defied everything he knew about agriculture. Something extraordinary was happening on his farm, something that would forever change not only his life, but that of everyone around him. That night, as the family gathered for dinner, the sky was especially starry. As the weeks passed, subtle changes began to manifest on Jack's property. The first thing he noticed was the accelerated growth of the seedlings born from the golden seeds. In just 15 days, they had already transformed into small trees about 1 meter tall, with silver leaves that danced in the wind like metallic ribbons. But it wasn't just the new plants that behaved unusually. The entire orchard seemed to be responding to the presence of those mystical trees. The traditional apple trees, some decades old, began to produce larger and juicier fruits. The soil around became darker and more fertile, as if it had been enriched by some invisible force. Emily, who now spent more time on the farm than at college, meticulously collected data. "It's inexplicable," she commented, while measuring the perimeter of one of the silver trunks. "The growth of these trees defies all the laws of botany we know. And look at this, Dad." She pointed to the soil around the tree, where small wildflowers sprouted spontaneously, their petals displaying iridescent hues never before seen in the region. The family's vegetable garden also began to show extraordinary results. The tomatoes grew to the size of oranges, the lettuces developed fleshy and crispy leaves, and the carrots emerged from the earth with a subtle golden glow. The most impressive thing was that no pest dared to approach the crops. It was as if an invisible barrier protected each bed. Sarah, who had always maintained a small medicinal herb garden, noticed that her plants were different too. "The healing properties seem more potent," she explained to Jack one afternoon while preparing a mint tea. Mrs. Johnson, who has always suffered from joint pain, said that just 1 cup of my tea was enough to make her feel better than ever. The farm animals also showed changes in their behavior. The chickens began to lay eggs with pearly shells, and their yolks were a more intense and nutritious yellow. The cows produced milk in greater quantity than normal, with an exceptionally rich and creamy taste. But it was the behavior of the family's old dog, Max, that most intrigued Jack. The animal developed a strange habit of sitting near the silver trees for hours, as if in some kind of contemplative trance. Sometimes he would bark at the sky apparently for no reason, only for a gentle rain to begin falling minutes later. "It's as if he knew," Emily commented, observing Max on one of these occasions. "As if he could sense the changes in the weather even before they happen." News of the transformations began to spread through the region, first as whispers between neighbors, then as stories that traveled from mouth to mouth. People began to notice that the products coming from Jack Thompson's farm were different, more flavorful, more nutritious, more vital. One day during the town fair, an elderly lady approached the stand where Sarah was selling her products. Her eyes sparkled with ancient wisdom as she examined the displayed apples. "There is old magic in your land," she murmured, picking up one of the fruits. "The kind of magic that awakens when the earth recognizes a true guardian." Jack, who was helping his wife at the fair, felt a shiver run down his spine upon hearing those words. The lady continued, "You have been chosen. The ancient trees know how to recognize the souls that can protect their secrets." Before they could question her, the lady disappeared into the market crowd, leaving behind only the echo of her enigmatic words and a feeling that something even greater was yet to come. That night, as the family dined on the porch of the house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, Jack contemplated the changes that had occurred on his property. The silver trees swayed gently in the evening breeze, their leaves reflecting the last sun rays like tiny mirrors. "Dad," called Emily, interrupting his thoughts, "I think we need to start thinking about how we're going to deal with all of this. People are starting to ask questions, and it won't be long before others want to know the secret of our success." Jack nodded slowly, aware of the weight of responsibility that rested on his shoulders. The words of the lady at the market echoed in his mind. They had been chosen. But chosen for what? And how should they proceed with this extraordinary gift that had been granted to them? The fame of the wonders happening on Jack Thompson's farm spread like wildfire. Soon cars began to appear on the dirt road leading to the property. At first it was just curious locals, but as the days passed, people started coming from increasingly distant places. Among the visitors, Lucas Bennett stood out. a biotechnology entrepreneur who arrived in a luxury car accompanied by a team of specialists. His interest in the silver trees was evident, and his offers were tempting. "Mr. Thompson," said Lucas, adjusting his expensive tie as he walked through the orchard, "I'm prepared to offer a substantial amount for some seedlings of these extraordinary trees. Think of the possibilities. We could revolutionize world agriculture." Jack listened politely, but something in his gut warned him to be cautious. The words of the market lady about being a guardian echoed in his mind. "I appreciate the interest, Mr. Bennett, but for now I'm not considering selling any seedlings." The businessman didn't give up easily. Each week he returned with more generous offers and grander promises. $5 million for just 3 seedlings, he proposed on his last visit, extending a pre-filled check. "Think of what you could do with that money." Sarah, who observed everything with concern, supported her husband's decision to refuse the offers. "There's something special happening here," she said one night as they prepared dinner, "something that can't be bought or sold." Emily, in turn, dedicated herself to studying the phenomenon scientifically. She had converted a small shed into an improvised laboratory where she spent hours analyzing samples of soil, leaves, and fruits. "It's fascinating," she explained to the family. "The cells of these plants have a structure I've never seen in any book or scientific article." Meanwhile, the local community began to experience positive changes thanks to Jack's generosity. He started donating part of his excess production to the municipal school and the town's nursing home. The children who fed on the farm's products showed improvement in development and concentration, while the elderly reported more energy and vitality. Mrs. Wilson, the school cook, never tired of praising, "These vegetables have something special. The children have even started asking for seconds of salad. Who has ever heard of such a thing?" One day, a young school teacher, Olivia, came to thank Jack personally. She brought drawings made by the students, depicting the magical orchard as they imagined it to be. "Mr. Thompson, you can't imagine the impact you're having on these children's lives. It's not just the food, it's the hope you've brought to our community." Olivia's words deeply touched Jack. That afternoon, as he walked among the silver trees, he began to understand that his role went beyond simply taking care of this extraordinary gift. It was his duty to share its benefits in a conscious and responsible manner. The constant presence of visitors, however, began to affect the farm's routine. Some, more daring, tried to collect leaves or branches in secret. Jack found himself forced to hire security and establish limited hours for visits. It was during this period that he met Dr. Rachel Green, a respected botanist, who approached the phenomenon with a different perspective from other researchers. "What you have here," she said after spending a week studying the orchard, "is a perfect example of how there is still much we don't understand about nature. Some things don't need to be explained or commercially exploited. They need to be protected." Dr. Green's words resonated with what Jack already felt instinctively. On a particularly busy morning, as he watched another line of cars forming at the farm's entrance, he made an important decision. It was time to find a balance between sharing the blessings of his land and protecting its mystery. With the help of Emily and Dr. Green, he began to develop a controlled visitation program where small groups could learn about the orchard and sustainable agricultural practices. The silver trees and black apples remained in a restricted area, protected from curious eyes and eager hands. "Dad," said Emily one night, as they organized the visit records, "I think I finally understood why the trees chose our farm." She paused, looking out the window at the moonlit orchard. "It's not just about the land or the care we have for the plants. It's about how we choose to use this gift to help others." Night fell over the farm like a velvet cloak, bringing with it a different kind of quietness than usual. Jack, exhausted after another day of guided tours, fell asleep as soon as his head touched the pillow. It was then that the dreams began. In the first dream, he saw himself in his orchard, but the silver trees had grown to reach the clouds. Their leaves whispered messages he couldn't fully understand. A sense of urgency filled the air, and the wind carried a silent warning. He woke up startled in a cold sweat. Sarah, noticing his restlessness, turned on the bedside lamp. "What's wrong, Jack? You were tossing and turning." "I dreamed about the orchard," he replied, still trying to organize his thoughts. "It was different, as if the trees were trying to tell me something." In the following nights, the dreams continued, becoming more vivid and disturbing. In one of them, he saw dark clouds forming on the horizon, larger and more threatening than any storm he had ever witnessed. In the dream, the silver trees moved in a coordinated manner, their leaves all pointing in the same direction. Emily, who had started sleeping at the farm more frequently, also began having similar dreams. "It's as if we were connected to something bigger," she commented during breakfast. "For the trees seem to be preparing us for something." Confirmation that the dreams were not mere coincidence came through Max. The dog began to exhibit even stranger behavior, barking insistently at the clear sky and digging holes in specific locations in the orchard. Jack, who had learned to trust the animal's instincts, began to map these points. Dr. Green, who had become a close friend of the family, visited the farm regularly to monitor the changes. "Animals have a sensitivity that we lost throughout evolution," she explained, watching Max dig another hole. "If he's acting like this, there must be a reason." It was during one of these visits that Dr. Green brought worrying news. Meteorologists are detecting unusual weather patterns in the region. There's a forecast of an unprecedented atmospheric phenomenon for the coming weeks. Dr. Green's words seemed to awaken something in the silver trees. That same afternoon, their leaves began to move in sync, even without wind, all pointing to the west. Jack, following his instinct, began to make markings on the ground, following the direction indicated by the trees. Sarah, who had always had a more practical side, suggested that they start preparing for whatever was coming. "If these dreams are warnings, we need to listen." The family began preparations discreetly, not wanting to cause panic in the community. Jack reinforced the farm structures, following precisely the points that Max had indicated with his digging. Emily, using her engineering knowledge, helped create a drainage system in the locations pointed out by the trees. The dreams intensified as the days passed. Now Jack clearly saw in his nightly visions the path the storm would take. The silver trees in his dreams formed a protective barrier, their roots intertwining under the earth like a safety net. One particularly significant night, Jack had a different dream. In it, the lady from the market appeared again, her words echoing with crystal clarity. "The guardian must protect not only the trees, but all those who seek refuge in their shade." He woke up with absolute certainty of what he needed to do. During breakfast, he shared his decision with the family. "We need to prepare the farm not just to protect ourselves, but to shelter those who will need it when the storm comes." Sarah and Emily immediately agreed. They began adapting the barn and other sheds, transforming them into possible shelters. Dr. Green, upon learning of the plan, mobilized her contacts at the university to discreetly obtain emergency supplies. The silver trees seemed to approve of the plan. Their branches moved gently, even on windless days, as if nodding in agreement. At night, the glow they emitted seemed more intense, forming a luminous canopy over the property. As the family prepared, Jack couldn't help but think about how his life had changed since the appearance of the first black apples. The gift they received was not just a privilege, but a responsibility. And now, with the storm approaching, it would be put to the test in a way he had never imagined. Dawn brought with it a sky of intense clear blue, but Jack knew that serenity was deceptive. The signs of nature were increasingly evident to those who knew how to interpret them. The farm's ants began building their anthills at higher levels of the terrain, birds flew in unusual formations, and the cows refused to graze in certain areas of the pasture. Emily, who continued her research in the improvised laboratory, noticed significant changes in her instrument readings. "The atmospheric pressure is showing abnormal variations," she explained during lunch, spreading graphs across the kitchen table, "and the silver trees are producing an extraordinary amount of sap." News of the approach of an unprecedented climate phenomenon began to circulate through the town. The mayor called an emergency meeting with key community leaders, and Jack was asked to participate. In the town hall, meteorologists presented alarming data about the formation of a cyclone of proportions never before seen in the region. "Forecasts indicate winds of up to 93 miles per hour, explained the chief meteorologist, pointing to satellite maps. "We need to start evacuating the most vulnerable areas immediately." Jack stood up during the meeting, his voice calm but firm, echoing through the room. "My farm can serve as a shelter. We have reinforced structures and sufficient supplies to accommodate several families." His offer was received with a mix of relief and skepticism. Some knew the stories about the mystical properties of his land. Others doubted that a farm could offer adequate protection against such a devastating force. Back at the property, the family intensified preparations. Sarah organized the stock of food and medicines, while Emily coordinated the adaptation of spaces to receive people. The silver trees seemed to respond to the urgency of the moment. Their leaves emitted a more intense glow during the night, and their golden sap dripped in patterns that formed natural maps on the ground. Dr. Green, who had become a constant presence on the farm, brought an intriguing discovery. The roots of the silver trees are expanding in an extraordinary way, she explained, showing images from a ground radar. They're creating an underground network that seems to be strengthening the entire structure of the terrain. An even more surprising phenomenon began to manifest. The trees started shedding their leaves in an orderly manner, forming silver paths that led to specific points on the property. Jack, following these paths, discovered that they indicated exactly where reinforcements and protections should be installed. Max, the family's faithful dog, now spent nights walking in circles around the property, as if patrolling an invisible perimeter. His behavior changed drastically. He no longer barked at the sky, but kept a fixed gaze on the horizon, as if standing guard. The community began to realize that something special was happening on the farm. People appeared daily, offering help with preparations. Mrs. Johnson brought her medicinal herbs, Mr. Wilson made his tractor available for heavy work, and even Lucas Bennett, the businessman who previously wanted to buy the seedlings, offered resources and equipment without making demands. "It's amazing how people come together in times of need," commented Sarah, watching the volunteers work. Jack nodded, realizing that the true gift of the mystical trees might not just be their apparent magic, but their ability to bring out the best in people. One afternoon, while supervising the installation of protective panels, Jack noticed something extraordinary. Small silver shoots were beginning to emerge around the entire property, forming a natural circle. Emily, after analysis, confirmed that they were descendants of the original trees, born spontaneously. "It's as if they're creating a protective barrier," she said, marveling. "Nature is organizing itself to defend us." As the days passed, the atmosphere on the farm transformed. What started as a refuge was becoming a symbol of hope and unity for the entire community. People who came to help with preparations left different, touched by something they couldn't explain. The sky dawned with an unsettling purplish coloration, and a heavy silence hung over the region. On Jack's farm, preparations were entering their final phase. The main barn had been transformed into a large communal dormitory, with improvised bunk beds and separate areas for families. The old tool shed now housed an emergency infirmary, organized by Mrs. Johnson and other women from the community who had knowledge of natural medicine. The silver trees seemed taller and brighter than ever. Their leaves emitted a constant glow, even during the day, creating a luminous canopy that extended across the entire property. The golden sap that dripped from their trunks had formed intricate patterns on the ground, as if they were ancient inscriptions left by nature. "Look at this," called Emily, who was analyzing soil samples near the trees. "The composition of the soil is changing. It's as if it's becoming denser, more resistant." Dr. Green, who no longer left the farm, confirmed the observation. "The tree roots have created such an intricate underground network that they've practically transformed the soil into a monolithic structure. It's as if they've built a natural foundation." The first families began to arrive at dusk, following the civil defense guidelines. Sarah received them with her characteristic calmness, designating spaces and organizing accommodations. Among the refugees was teacher Olivia, who immediately began organizing activities for the children, keeping them distracted from the growing fear. Jack observed everything with a mixture of concern and hope. The dreams continued, but now they brought different messages. Instead of warnings, they showed images of protection and renewal. The night before, he had dreamed of the silver trees forming a shield of light over the entire property. Max had completely stopped barking. Now the dog maintained a silent vigil, moving among the people like an attentive guardian. Occasionally he would stop near the children, allowing them to pet him as if understanding their need for comfort. A particularly touching moment occurred when Lucas Bennett arrived, no longer as the businessman interested in profits, but as someone who recognized the importance of the moment. "Mr. Thompson," he said, extending his hand, "I brought some generators and communication equipment. I think we might need them." The community organized itself organically. People who barely knew each other began working together, sharing skills and resources. Mr. Wilson, the town mechanic, coordinated a team that checked all the equipment. Mrs. Wilson commanded the community kitchen, transforming the abundant provisions into meals that nourished body and soul. The silver trees seemed to respond to the presence of people. Their branches moved gently, even without wind, as if they were waving in approval. At night, their glow intensified, providing natural lighting that dispensed with lanterns and lamps. Emily spent the afternoon explaining to curious children about the phenomenon of the trees. "It's as if they were guardians," she said, "connected to something much greater than all of us." As night fell, the wind began to change. Strong gusts blew from the south, bringing air charged with electricity. On the horizon, dark clouds accumulated, occasionally illuminated by distant lightning. Sarah gathered everyone in the main barn for a final check. "We have enough food for 2 weeks," she informed. "Stored drinking water, medicines, blankets. We are prepared." Jack observed the movement when he noticed something extraordinary. Small golden lights began to appear in the air, like fireflies, emanating from the silver trees. They danced in the wind, forming patterns that resembled constellations. Dr. Green, who was by his side, whispered, "It's the sap. It's vaporizing in the air, creating a kind of natural protection field." The night advanced, and with it grew the tension. The children were already asleep, lulled by stories told by teacher Olivia. The adults talked in low voices, sharing memories and hopes. At the center of it all, the silver trees remained as silent sentinels, their leaves glowing ever more intensely against the increasingly dark sky. Jack made a final round of the property, accompanied by Max. The wind now howled among the trees, but within the limits of the silver orchard, a supernatural calm prevailed. It was as if they were inside a protection bubble, waiting for the moment when their strength would be truly tested. Dawn never really came that day. The sky remained in a perpetual twilight, with clouds so dense they swallowed the sunlight. The wind had transformed into a constant and threatening force, howling like an invisible beast. Inside the main barn, about 200 people waited in tense silence. The children, seated in a circle, listened attentively as teacher Olivia told stories about magical trees and ancient guardians. Their eyes occasionally turned to the windows, where they could see the silver glow of the mystical trees growing in intensity. Jack was checking the last tie-downs when Emily urgently called him. "Dad, come see this." In the improvised laboratory, the measurement instruments were registering unprecedented readings. The energy emanating from the trees is increasing exponentially. It's as if they're preparing for something. Dr. Green, who was analyzing the data alongside Emily, pointed to a pattern in the graphs. "Look, the energy waves are synchronized. The trees are working together like a single organism." Outside, the sky darkened even more. Lightning cut through the clouds at increasingly shorter intervals, momentarily illuminating the property with violet flashes. The wind now carried loose objects, transforming them into dangerous projectiles. It was then that something extraordinary began to happen. The silver trees, which were already shining intensely, began to pulse with a rhythmic light. Their leaves moved in perfect synchrony, and the golden sap that dripped from their trunks seemed to float in the air, forming a luminous mist. "It's incredible," murmured Sarah, observing through the window. "It's as if they're dancing." Max, who had been restless for hours, suddenly calmed down. The dog sat in the center of the barn, as if knowing that his role of alerting had ended. Now it was time to trust in the protection of the trees. The first impact of the storm came as a deafening roar. The walls of the barn shook but held. Through the cracks in the windows, the refugees could see something surprising. The strongest gusts seemed to deflect around the property, like water contouring a rock in the river. "The barrier is working," exclaimed Emily, her eyes shining with scientific excitement even amidst the chaos. The following hours were a test of endurance and faith. The storm raged outside, but within the limits of the farm a supernatural calm prevailed. The silver trees continued their silent dance, their roots pulsing beneath the earth in a rhythm that could be felt by everyone. The community united even more strongly during these critical hours. People who barely knew each other shared stories and comfort. Mrs. Wilson organized a large pot of soup, its comforting aroma helping to calm nerves. Mr. Wilson led a group in prayers while others sang softly, creating an atmosphere of hope. Lucas Bennett, the businessman who previously only saw commercial value in the trees, was silent in a corner, observing everything with wonder in his eyes. "I never imagined," he finally said, "that something like this existed, something so much greater than our small plans." As the night progressed, the power of the storm began to diminish. The wind gusts, once violent, were transforming into whispers. The light from the silver trees, however, remained strong and constant, like a beacon of hope in the darkness. Jack, who hadn't slept, made a final round of the property. What he saw left him speechless. Where there were once only a few silver trees, now dozens of small shoots emerged from the soil, their leaves already emitting a soft glow. "It's a new beginning," said Dr. Green, who had followed him. "The trees aren't just protecting us, they're multiplying, strengthening themselves." When the first rays of sunlight finally managed to penetrate the clouds, they revealed a transformed landscape around the farm. Where there was destruction and chaos, within the limits of the property reigned absolute peace. The silver trees swayed gently, their leaves sparkling like thousands of small mirrors reflecting the morning light. The community emerged from the barn slowly, marveling at the contrast between the protection they had received and the visible devastation beyond the farm's boundaries. There were no words to describe the gratitude and awe they felt. In the weeks that followed the great storm, Jack Thompson's farm transformed into a symbol of hope and renewal. While neighboring towns struggled to recover from the damage, the property protected by the silver trees flourished even more, becoming a natural refuge for all who needed help. The new shoots that had emerged during the storm grew with extraordinary speed, their silver leaves dancing in the wind like small mirrors. Emily discovered that each new tree possessed unique properties, some with capabilities to purify the air, others to enrich the soil around them. "It's as if each one had its own mission," she explained to visitors who now came from all parts to witness the phenomenon. "Together, they form a perfectly balanced ecosystem." Sarah transformed part of the house into a center for studies on natural medicine, working together with Mrs. Johnson to document the healing properties of plants that grew under the influence of the mystical trees. The results were surprising. Common herbs developed enhanced medicinal properties, and new species emerged with characteristics never before seen. Lucas Bennett, profoundly transformed by the experience, established a foundation dedicated to environmental preservation. "I learned that there are things that cannot be bought or sold," he declared during the inauguration. "Our role is to protect and learn from them." Jack, now recognized as the guardian of the silver trees, began receiving letters and messages from people all over the world. Many reported the emergence of similar phenomena in their regions, small silver shoots emerging in unexpected places, bringing positive transformations to their communities. Dr. Green coordinated a group of researchers studying the phenomenon, always respecting the natural limits and the mysteries that the trees chose to maintain. "Some things don't need to be scientifically explained," she would say. "Sometimes, the greatest knowledge is in accepting and protecting the extraordinary." Teacher Olivia developed a special educational program, bringing children from various schools to learn about ecology and sustainability in the unique environment of the farm. Under the silver canopy of the trees, they developed a deep connection with nature, taking with them lessons that would transform the future. Max, the faithful four-legged guardian, gained companions. Other animals began to seek refuge on the property, creating a unique harmony among species. It was common to see rare birds nesting in the silver branches and small wild animals coexisting peacefully in the surroundings. One year after the storm, during a celebration that brought the entire community together, the lady from the market reappeared. Her eyes sparkled with wisdom as she observed the changes. "The circle is complete," she told Jack. "The trees chose their guardian well, and now your gift spreads throughout the world." The lady's words proved true. Each day new stories arrived from distant places. From small villages in the countryside to big cities, silver shoots emerged, bringing with them the promise of renewal and hope. It was as if the earth was awakening, reminding humanity of its deep connection with nature. Jack, sitting on his porch at dusk, watched the silver orchard glow under the rosy sky. Sarah joined him, bringing 2 cups of tea made with the special herbs from the garden. Emily, who had decided to permanently establish her laboratory on the farm, worked on her notes near the trees. "You know," said Jack, his voice calm and reflective, "when I found that first black apple, I never imagined we were at the beginning of something so much greater than ourselves." The sun set slowly, and the silver trees began their nightly dance, their branches swaying gently, while their leaves emitted that characteristic glow that had become a beacon of hope for so many. And so the story of the silver trees continues, not just on Jack Thompson's farm, but in every small shoot that emerges around the world, reminding everyone that the greatest miracles are born from care, protection, and love for nature. 10 years had passed since the great storm that forever changed life on Jack Thompson's farm. What was once a common rural property had now become a true natural sanctuary, known worldwide as the Silver Grove. The mystical trees, once restricted to a small orchard, now covered entire hectares. Their canopies formed a silver canopy that could be seen from miles away, shining like a beacon of hope in the landscape. The phenomenon that had begun there had spread, with similar groves emerging in various parts of the world, each with its own unique characteristics. Jack, now with greying hair, walked among the trees with the same reverence as a decade ago. His role as guardian had evolved. He now led a global network of caretakers, all dedicated to protecting and studying these extraordinary ecosystems. Emily, who had become a renowned scientist, had established a cutting-edge research center on the farm. Her studies on the symbiosis between silver trees and other life forms revolutionized the understanding of ecology and opened new paths for environmental regeneration. "Dad," called Emily, approaching with a tablet in hand. "The results of the latest tests have arrived. The regenerative properties of the sap are becoming even more potent." Sarah, who in recent years had dedicated herself to expanding the Natural Medicine Center, joined them. "The medicinal applications are extraordinary," she commented. "We're seeing recoveries that would have been considered impossible before." The impact of the Silver Grove went far beyond the farm. The region, once known for its traditional agriculture, was now a hub of innovation in sustainability and green technology. Small startups had flourished, developing solutions inspired by the unique properties of the mystical trees. Lucas Bennett, the former businessman now dedicated to the environmental cause, arrived for his monthly visit. "The news is encouraging," he announced. "The reforestation model based on the DNA of silver trees is being implemented in desertified areas in Africa and Asia. The preliminary results are surprising. The community around the farm had transformed. What was once a small rural town was now a vibrant center of education and research. The school where Olivia taught had become a model institution, with students from all over the world coming to learn about the new relationship between humanity and nature. As the sun set, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, Jack gathered his family and close friends for a moment of reflection. The soft glow of the silver trees created an almost magical atmosphere. 10 years ago, he began, his voice loaded with emotion, we thought we were protecting these trees. But the truth is that they were teaching us about unity, about care, about our true relationship with the planet. The group observed in silence as the first stars appeared in the sky. The legacy of the silver trees continued to grow, a living testament to the power of nature and the human capacity to learn, adapt, and flourish in harmony with the world around them. 25 years after the emergence of the first black apples, the world was a very different place. The phenomenon of silver trees had spread across all continents, creating a global network of interconnected ecosystems. These mystical groves had not only transformed the environment, but also profoundly reshaped human societies. Jack, now a man with white hair but still with lively eyes, was about to make his last great journey. The UN had convened an extraordinary assembly in New York, bringing together world leaders, scientists, and guardians of silver groves from all over the planet. The goal, to discuss the next step in the evolution of the relationship between humanity and nature. "Are you ready, Dad?" asked Emily, now a mature woman respected worldwide for her pioneering work. She adjusted her father's shirt collar, a gesture that reminded him of when she was just a curious girl running through the orchard. Sarah, with her grey hair tied in an elegant bun, approached with a small suitcase. "I packed some vials of our special sap. You never know when it might be useful." The helicopter that would take them landed in the field adjacent to the original Silver Grove. As they ascended, Jack had a panoramic view of his property. What was once a simple farm was now a vast sea of silver leaves, pulsing with life and energy. The trip to New York was an opportunity for reflection. Jack remembered how, over the years, the world had changed. The big cities, once centers of pollution and chaos, were now interwoven with green corridors of silver trees. Air quality had improved dramatically, and diseases once considered incurable were in decline thanks to the medicinal properties of plants associated with the mystical groves. At the UN Assembly, Jack found himself surrounded by an impressive diversity of people. There were representatives from indigenous tribes who had become guardians of silver groves on their ancestral lands, world-renowned scientists, spiritual leaders, and even astronauts who reported how the Earth, seen from space, now shone with a slight silver hue. When his turn to speak came, Jack climbed to the podium with slow but determined steps. The hall fell into complete silence. 25 years ago, he began, his voice calm but powerful, I was just a farmer concerned about his next harvest. Today, I stand before you not as an individual, but as part of something much greater. He paused, looking at the attentive faces in the audience. The silver trees are not just an extraordinary botanical phenomenon. They are a call for us to remember our true nature as guardians of this planet, not its conquerors. Jack continued, sharing not just the story of his farm, but the vision of a future where humanity and nature coexist in perfect harmony. He spoke about the lessons learned, the challenges overcome, and most importantly, about the inner transformation that each person experiences when truly connecting with the mystical trees. At the end of his speech, something extraordinary happened. Small silver shoots began to emerge between the cracks in the marble floor of the UN hall. It was as if the trees themselves were endorsing his words, reminding everyone that nature finds its way no matter where we are. The assembly transformed into a historic moment. On that day, nations from around the world committed to expanding the protection of silver groves, integrating their teachings into educational systems, and reshaping economies to be in harmony with the natural rhythms of the planet. When Jack returned to his farm, he was greeted by a crowd. People of all ages, nationalities, and backgrounds had gathered to thank and celebrate. Among them was the mysterious lady from the market, her face marked by time, but her eyes still shining with ancient wisdom. "You have fulfilled your role as guardian," she said, holding Jack's hands. "Now, it's time to pass the torch." That night, under the soft glow of the silver trees, Jack gathered his family. Emily, her children, Sarah, and all those who had become part of this extraordinary journey. Together, they planted a new seedling, born from a recently discovered black apple. As the small tree was gently placed in the earth, Jack felt a deep sense of fulfillment and hope. The cycle continued, always renewing, always evolving, and although his role as the first guardian was coming to an end, he knew that the true work, that of uniting humanity and nature, was just beginning. The silver leaves shone intensely that night, like stars fallen from the sky, illuminating the path to a future where the extraordinary had become part of everyday life, and where each person understood their role as a guardian of the natural magic that surrounds us.